really, and you're as well, obviously big into exercise, but people doing any movement is great. People doing any exercise that they enjoy is great. And I'm always saying to people, if your journey to health causes you anxiety, if you have this list you have to get through, if you have to get up and do your cold plunge, you've got to do 20 minutes of meditation, you've got to walk on the grass, you've got to hug 3 trees, you've got to squeeze 8 lemons and touch 2 unicorns, and then you feel good during your day. It's the balance is off there to me.
Yeah,
you know,
you're spending so much time. It's like the self-defense people. Like, it's like, I'm going to train self-defense and I need to be able to hold this and I need to be able to do this in defense against a knife. Like, for something that may or may never happen in your whole life. And it's like it's a warped view. You end up with this warped view. And I look at sometimes, especially online, when I'm looking at like younger guys in particular. The other thing, I also see younger girls stuff, because Instagram says you're a 45-year-old man. Well, I'm 46 actually.
God.
You're a 46-year-old man, so obviously you're a perv. So we need to show you fitness models on repeat over and over again. And I keep going. I do, like, I curate my social media.
Yeah, not
people
relevant.
People are not going to believe when I say that, by the way, that I'm not sitting there. But I do, like, and I go and I like do not interested, and they still show me it. Yeah. But anyway, to the point. It's like this obsession. It's obsessive. It's not about health and fitness anymore. It's more about, like, how good do you look? And if you don't do these things, it's going to be, your life is awful. And you're obviously, this is the cause of your depression and your anxiety. It's not the fact that you're sitting there on your phone watching this stuff over and over again. It's the fact you're not doing it. Here, we'll start before we moan our arses off. We're only 4 minutes in, and we did have a conversation about positivity before I turned the camera on, and now we're like, that's all bullshit. But I'm always giving out about social media, always. Yeah. So I thought it'd be fun to start.
Yes. Fun for me, maybe. Okay,
yeah, probably not so fun. I thought we would go through my nutrition. I'm actually interested as well, because I've never worked with a nutritionist.
Yeah,
I've only ever worked with, like, strength and conditioning coaches who have managed nutrition. Yeah, to some degree, but they're essentially kind of handling a pamphlet and letting you figure it out yourself. I don't think I'm too bad. Yeah, but. Let's go. I'm actually nervous now. I shouldn't have done this. Okay, we'll go.
Put yourself on the spot.
So we've just met for the first time, and here we go. I am 46, almost 47. Yeah. And I don't want to say that I'm over fat. I'm not. I keep myself pretty well, but I definitely struggle with my nutrition in some ways. Let's go.
How so? So, like. Yeah, let's go. How so? You know, I think when you talk about, there's a lot of trainers and coaches online that do nutrition, and I think most people know how to figure out a calorie deficit. And let's face it, martial artists and people generally are always trying to lose weight. But then there's the losing weight, and then there's the performance nutrition and the fueling your training. And for me, the art is in the performance nutrition, especially when you're dealing with someone that's maybe has to be in a bit of a deficit because they've got a weight class to make. So that's when it becomes like for me, like a lovely chess puzzle to figure out.
Right, the moving pieces. I'll tell you where I struggle is I used to be able to figure it out myself through just brute force. So it was like powering through. So when I was younger, my metabolism was obviously a lot more capable, and my training schedule was a lot more flexible, where I could just do another run or two during the week, and that would get me down, and I'd be like, I can easily do that. Yeah, yeah. Whereas now, well, for one, my hips are bad, so I can't run anymore, so that's not happening. Secondly, I have a busier lifestyle, a more kind of, active business lifestyle, I suppose you'd say. So the time there isn't it. And thirdly, if I add that extra session, even if it's just a run or if it's just a walk, it might tip me over the edge into injury, because that's where I'm at the moment. So I'll give you my last tournament? It was the tournament before last, UK Masters in September. I was fighting under 88, so I'm walking around now at 92 kilos. I was around the same time. I was around the same at the time. So probably with the gi on, I was 94, and I was going and said, look, I have to do under 88, and I had 3 weeks to do it.
Oh God, that's 6 kilos.
That's 6 kilos. But I did it. I want to point out that I did it, right? Just before we go, I stood on those scales, and I was 80. I was actually 87.9 in the gi when I did it. And I did it through essentially like extreme deficits. So my training quality was next to zero. My performance quality on the day was okay. I won the first match, and then my second match, I didn't, because they're only 5 minutes. They're 5-minute matches. That's not a lot to me. It's not a lot when you've come from,
when you've got the depth of knowledge, you can manage your energy a bit better than most of us.
But definitely where I struggled was focus and concentration, and I lost my concentration in the middle of the match, and then felt that kind of brain foggy kind of thing. So I didn't fatigue, but I wasn't
sharp. This is something that people don't realise is your brain, they've studies 2% dehydration can affect your concentration on your brain, and your brain has to communicate with your muscles, and it does that via fluids. So if you're saying he's grabbing my sleeve, move my arm, and if there's a 0.2 second delay from that message getting from your brain to your wrist, you're going to get caught. And that dehydration does that slight 2% dehydration. So if you're going in, you've had a match, you probably, I'm going to guess, haven't had breakfast, probably didn't even have dinner the night before, maybe had lunch the day before if you were lucky. Your glycogen stores are probably empty because you've chosen to go low carb to get that extra weight off. So that's also the fuel your muscles use to contract. As with water and electrolyte balance, the contractility of your muscles, so how hard they can flex, is based on your hydration status as well. So the break in concentration is absolutely from the dieting. It's not that you suddenly you don't have the brain power for it, But these are all the things that people overlook, especially on short turnaround weigh-ins with jiu-jitsu. And I always say to people, you may well go through your first match. You might get some glycogen built if you have a long delay before the second match. If you've got some fast-acting carbs, and you can get some rehydration in. But it really depends on how severely you've restricted yourself coming in, and then also, your matches are going to get harder as you go through the bracket. You need to be better as you go through the bracket, not worse, So it's like a false economy. It's like people also often think when they've made weight, they've won the competition. And I'm like, you have a fight, And then if the bracket's big, you may forget it.
That's there's a lot to unpick even just in what you've said there, because that's the bugbear that I see is one of the big things that I see among my guys and among the people that come. I see 600 athletes every few weeks, because just from running tournaments, from running competitions. Yeah. And you see guys doing, which I did in the UK in September, running outside, trying to making weight that way. And I call them idiots. I'm like, what's that idiot doing? But of course, and then every now and again, I am that idiot. I have been that idiot. And where I've misjudged. That day, I thought I was good. So on the morning of, I bought a pack of jellies and I had a bottle of water, and I sipped on the way down the car. We had about the guts of an hour's drive from the airport to the venue. Yeah. And I said, I'll be good. And I was chatting away to the guys. I went in, I stood on the scales, and I was 1.5 over still. Yeah. And I had an hour and a half. You'd flown that morning as well, right? So sometimes flying brings on water retention as well. The pressure in the airplane. Even in the short term. Yeah, it's actually about the air pressure rather than how long you're in the airplane. Really? Because I'd heard it out about long haul flights. Yeah. And I'd always understood that was the case with long haul flights. So that's why, say the likes of Nathan is going out a week early. Yeah. To ensure that he's going to clear that. But even short haul. Yeah. So the long haul idea is just that your circulation down regulates. So your body will your body is always just trying to get to its homeostasis point. So it's just so if your circulation is moving, so it's not pushing through water, it'll hold on, and then it'll retain water. So when you're drinking as well, and if you add in fizzy drinks on the airplane, like the gas and stuff, goes inside your body. But there's also the air pressure in the airplane. Now I have never not looked into the science of it. I just know, I knew this from my own flying for weigh-ins. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly, but I do believe it's to do with the air pressure in the aircraft, that you're in this closed, airtight space. So even if that's only an hour or two, your body, again, because it really always wants to help itself to stay normal. So it's fuck, we better hold on to some water here, because this air is very dry. There's no moisture in this air. Okay, right. So that can affect it. So that might be why you're up. Or there's potential you had some airport food that was higher in sodium than you realise, and your body just draws on water then with sodium, especially if you've been really depleted leading up to that. Okay, yeah, because I can tell you it sucked, because I'm standing on the scales and I'm going, I'm already starving. I know I'm pretty dry. Yeah. And I was looking forward to my sports drink, and I was looking forward to my little bag of jellies and to try and get some food in before. And I was like, this is torture. And then one of my training partners who was over with me he goes, you know what you always say in the gym is what? We always make weight. We don't not make weight. And I went, oh, for fuck's sake. That means now he's after saying that. I've no excuse now. Yeah. So I layered up and I went outside and I ran and then I came back in and I sat in and I kind of did a kind of a mini wrap in the dressing room then to try and go. And when I stood on, I was under. So I obviously still had it to go. Yeah. It was obviously still there to lose. Not that I felt like it did. And of course, anybody who's ever cut weight will know the pain of standing in the bathroom waiting for something to happen, and you're going, no, there's nothing there. And then something goes, and you go, that's all.
I say to some of my fighters, if I want them to go for number 2 and they feel like they can't, I'm like, think about your boyfriend having sex with someone else. Jealousy and nerves will make you poo.
It was like, all right, okay, that's going to be an interesting one for next time. All right, I'm going to put my hand on somebody's shoulder. I got something to say to you.
I have a tip for you.
I've got a tip for you.
That's science-backed. Jealousy, nerves.
Jealousy and nerves. I've got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what should I have done differently in the lead up?
Well, I'd say not wait till 3 weeks beforehand to be trying to get on weight would be ideal, you know. Okay. So we would look at like actual fat loss rather than just manipulating what your body weighs. So like 8 to 10 weeks. Because of course, and I'm sure you've seen that, the more severe the restriction leading up to the comp means the more severe the rebound after the comp. So now you're probably walking around at 93 rather than 92 kind of job, you know, because physiologically your body tries to get those calories back. It wants those calories, and you're like, oh, why am I so hungry, or why am I binging? And people just thinking, oh, I've lost self-control, and like we're great at judging ourselves, like I'm such a pig, I can't stop eating, but actually don't give themselves a moment to think actually physiologically your body's trying to make up that 20,000 calorie deficit you've had it in.
And is that one of the reasons that do you find like with athletes cutting gets more difficult over time?
Yeah. So what happens is that rebound gets harder, and then they have to restrict even further to get on weight, and then they rebound more, and it's a vicious circle. But also what's also happening as well is every time you severely restrict your calories, you're losing muscle mass. So there's a level of body recomposition. So when you think about trying to sweat out, you're sweating water out of your muscle. So if you lose 2 kilos of muscle and you're like, oh, I managed to sweat off 3 kilos fine last time, but you're after dropping maybe 5% of your muscle mass, you try and sweat out 2 kilos now, it feels very much harder because there isn't. So you might weigh the same, but actually it's more fat, and you can't squeeze water out of fat. We squeeze water out of muscle.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because certainly like I knew I'd made a mistake. I knew I made an error. In my defence, there was nobody at the other category, and initially I wanted to do that, and then 3 weeks out, when I was discussing, I discovered that the 94 category was going to be earlier, which was going to be before I would arrive. So my flight was early in the morning. So I said, well, look, I've only got one choice here, which is 88. And so let's do it. And, and I'm pig-headed. So and my wife was sitting looking at me for like the 3 or 4 days before, when I was like in severe, essentially not eating, like eating like peanut butter. And she was going, how are you doing this? Like still at your age, like essentially, I'm your age when people say things like that. But like basically how and why, the why is easy for me, but the how is definitely gets more difficult as you get older. So if you're talking sort of for, let's say somebody's now going for I'm thinking about the next, well, this will probably come out in about 3 weeks, so I'm trying to figure this one out. So if they're kind of competing in the summer now, and they're thinking to themselves, right, okay, I've got 5 weeks and I'm currently in the weight class above, so approximately 6 kilos. So you're looking at fat loss management essentially. Yeah,
ideally, and like less aggressive. So obviously 6 kilos to you at 90 kilos versus 6 kilos to someone at 60 kilos is a very different ask. You've got 5 or 10% basically. So I like to work with percentages of people, but I would say for men, I'd like them to be within 10% of their weight category. For women, 6 to 8, depending if it's a woman that has a lot of muscle mass. If she's maybe been athletic all her life, we can push that a bit harder, but generally 6-ish% for women, 10% for men for short turnaround weigh-in. So jiu-jitsu is the shortest of turnaround, But so what I would do is I would get them to calculate what is their maintenance calories. So look at their BMR, or their basal metabolic rate, and adjust that for their activity. And then I would say knock off 10% of that, start in a 10% deficit. Do that for a week. For men, you'll get that feedback in a week. Women, it might take 2, just the cycle where they might be. And adjust from there, see how you're feeling.
Okay.
And then there's a very simple performance nutrition principle that I like to use for people that are trying to do it themselves. It's called the 3-2-1. So pretty easy to remember. So it will be 3 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight, 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, and 1 gram of fat per kilo of body weight. That will land you at about maintenance, and then you can adjust as you go. Okay. And we know that protein, when you're going into calorie restricted phases, increasing your protein protects your current muscle mass, can slow down the loss of muscle. So as you're going into your deficit, I would focus higher on protein. I would let the other 2 flux. Some people go better on high carb, some people go better on high fat. Just putting the carbs around training to make training not feel absolutely miserable.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So if you're working with someone and we're limited on their carbs, I'll get it in before and straight after training, because then at least they'll recover, you know, and they can be low carb while they're doing their office job or while they're doing whatever they do, but get the carbs in to fuel their training and to fuel their recovery.
Yeah, because anybody who's ever gone low carb during a training period, it's horrible.
It's not, there's no bullets in the gun when you're trying to roll, you know.
Yeah, and everything feels bad. And we spoke about concentration as well. That thing is just so difficult, and it feels miserable. And then as a result, then a friend of mine has a great phrase which he uses about certain MMA fighters that he coaches, and he said, "This guy's a professional dieter. He's not a professional fighter." Yeah. And I think it's always perfect. It's I always think about that when I see guys going, "Oh, well, I'm doing this for the weight and I'm doing that for the weight." So people ask me two questions when they're training for competition. They ask me about their weight and they ask me about their strength and conditioning. And I said, nobody ever asked me about their skills or their technique. Right? Nobody. If anybody has a question, it's always about how do I get to weight and how should I be fitter and stronger and everything else like that. And I'm like, no, you should be focusing on your game. Your game is your job. You know, your jiu-jitsu is your job, or your MMA or whatever it is. But people spend so much mental energy doing that.
Yeah.
Which we spoke off camera earlier about. To give people a bit of context, the first time I knew about your work, obviously I knew you, but I knew about your work was when you worked with Jessica, my black belt here, for the Europeans. And for her, I think it was just the release of letting somebody else manage that was a really huge thing. Just like, okay, that's dealt with. That's compartmentalized. So I don't have to get up in the morning and worry about what it is and how I'm going to eat or what everything else.
And then there's the decision fatigue. A lot of people, like, they think they're trying to do good and they're like, okay, I won't eat that, I won't do that. But then they wind up starving and they wind up undoing what they've done during the day, because then they pick for the choices that they didn't want to have that day, you know. But it's a big thing I'm always saying to fighters, your fight camp should be about getting better at your sport. It shouldn't be about what you weigh. What you weigh shouldn't be your main thought every day. What you eat every day shouldn't be your main thought every day. Unfortunately, it is, and it's a terrible thing in combat sports that it's the thing people do. They talk about it. It's a given that you'll be cutting weight, that people be cutting weight. Like when we were at the Dublin Open the weekend, I can almost tell, looking as we get up into the brackets closer to the finals, who's fueled and who's not fueled. And as you get up in the belts especially, the skill discrepancies get smaller and smaller. It's the concentration and the fueling. And of course, eating right won't win you a medal, but it could lose you a medal by not eating right. And that's the way I like to look at it. You can fuck your competition by not eating right. But if you're crap at jiu-jitsu, it's not going to get you a gold medal if you've got the best fuel in the room, you know?
Well, as we start to get closer in skill levels and in fitness and in everything else, it's the marginal gains that make it. And if the margin is your nutrition, and certainly what I remember, even like 20 or so years ago, working with like a couple of top guys, and they were saying the next big things, it's not going to be in training. It's not going to be in power development. It's not going to be in anything else that we do. It's going to be in nutrition. It's going to be how do we get the maximum out of each and every person on an individual style basis. So in other words, that you have your own nutrition plan that suits you and that
works for you and your lifestyle. And
your lifestyle, your training, everything. And I think... and especially the type of athlete that you are as well. So if you are that kind of powerful, strong, bulky athlete, and you are basically feeding yourself like an endurance runner, that's not going to be... And
I find that very exciting, because for me, I can't control if the girl I'm going to compete against has an insane armbar from every fucking angle. But I keep cursing out. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not a family show.
When I get passionate, the curses come out. But what I can control is what I eat. So I find that very exciting. I can control my S&C and I can control my nutrition. I can't control how good the girls in my division are. So for me, it's the low-hanging fruit and it's an easy win. And I'll go in, and even just having that in my back pocket, like when I used to get into the ring, my thing was she didn't train as hard as me, and that just made me feel better, you know, because nobody trained harder than I did in my mind. And in this situation in jiu-jitsu, I'm like, they're all going to fail soon. They're going to fade soon. I just need to bide my time here. I just need to, you know, because
I've done my work. I've done my work in the kitchen. I've done my work at the table.
I have my jellies or my dates or my baby food purees at the side here. I've got my electrolyte sport drink. I've got everything to go between matches. Like, I'm good to go, you know. I've got my meal with my rice and chicken and broccoli for after the division, before the absolute, to really get the glycogen refilled. And I've got all of my little fast-acting carb snacks to have for the rest of the day, you know.
I think when you look at this is another one we'll go into maybe a little bit later, because I know we want to talk a little bit about teenage stuff and like nutrition and stuff like that. But when I'm teaching the teenage guys, and so the teenage guys who are just taking their first steps into real competition, they've done tournaments and stuff like that. Their mom and dad brought them and they jumped on the mat. But when they're starting to go, well, okay, I'm going to go for things like the European Championships, the Kids Europeans, or like the Dublin Open at the weekend there.
Yeah.
I talk about their bag. I said, so does your mom pack your bag? And they're all like, oh. I said, okay, well, that has to stop. Okay. So now you're in charge of your own bag. So we talk about like having everything prepared the night before, and that when you open up your bag, you should see everything on the top of your bag.
Brilliant.
And so we start with like the belt and your mouth guards and your water and your gi, and make sure that's there. And okay, so you know that's there, and your ID is there, so you can get through. So you need to open the bag and see everything. So that one little thing that you don't have to think about in the morning, and you don't have to panic, and that needs to be ready the night before. And then now we're starting to talk about food and fuel and things like that. So you don't want to walk into a venue and go, what's in the vending machine or what's in the cafe?
Which black belts do. It blows my mind.
Yes.
They'd be at Euros, black belt adult Euros, and they're like, oh, I was just going to get an acai bowl. And I'm like, are you actually winding me up? Like,
God, the frustration I can imagine sitting there is like, oh. It's extraordinary. That people do that. Like, so the first thing, like, for when I land off a plane, it's like, okay, I got to go find a shop now, and I got to get the little bits that I need. You know, I know I'm not going to get perfect, but you can get close.
But I mean, it'd be very hard. Like for me, it's like fast-acting carbs. So like rice cakes. You'll get rice cakes whatever country you're in, and they also travel. They're not going to get bought. They're not going to go off. You know, jar of peanut butter also fine. Now that's not a fast-acting carb, but that's just a fatty thing that you can have if you're kind of trying to get calories in, but
it's
not
really energy dense, right? So that's the big thing about that.
It's not voluminous. You'll get fruit, great. You'll get what I love, what I get all my fighters to have is, you know, the baby food fruit purees. So for when people are weaning their babies onto food, it's generally like apples and strawberries, and it's in a little perfectly little sachet, and you squeeze it into your mouth. It's really easy to digest, really fast acting. It's only got fruit in it, and you'll get them in every supermarket in every country in the world. So the only thing to watch out for there, if anybody's thinking about getting them, is some of them put vegetables in them. So don't get the fruit only ones, because vegetables are fibrous, and then they're slower releasing carbs, and then they're not used to in the bullpen. You want the fast stuff.
And they hang on to a little bit of water as well, don't they? The fibre hangs on to a little, probably not at that volume.
Just takes longer. No. But it'd be more so, this is like bullpen stuff or between match stuff we're talking, so we want that getting to where it needs to go ASAP, you know.
In terms of like what products are out there, there's an awful lot of crap on the shelves, like, isn't there? So there's like, when I'm thinking about what I see, for example, when you walk around the bullpen, you see what guys are pushing in, and it's usually like sachet forms, and it's a lot of it is like extreme levels of energy. So it's caffeinated and it's taurine and it's stuff like that. It's essentially like a Monster Energy in a small pack. Is that something you work with or recommend or anything?
No, I don't like gels. I don't like those type of things, and mainly because they are so densely filled with caffeine and then taurine. Because they've got so much caffeine, the taurine needs to bring it down so you don't have a heart attack. They can cause dehydration because they are so concentrated. They cause your body to bring in water, because again, your body's always trying to get, like I always say to people, your body water is like a glass of my waddy, and it has a concentration that it likes, and every time if you take out the concentration and it gets too watery, it's going to try and pull in more concentration, so more salt. If you make it too concentrated, it's going to pull in more water to try and reset itself to the right concentration. So those gels, like, I'd much prefer someone had a couple of dates and a black coffee, you know.
Right. Okay.
Because they're going to react much better in their body, and they're not going to cause the dehydration that we're trying to avoid when you're going to be going in and sweating anyway. You've already warmed up, you've sweated a bit, you know, you're worried about your weight, you're going to be sweating while you fight, so we want to keep everything as hydrated as we can.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of that stuff is marketed as sports nutrition, and it's like it's very smartly and very cleverly marketed. It's like a lot of supplements. It plays its role in endurance sports 100%. But what people miss is those guys are having gels on the bike, and then they've got a 500ml bottle of water, and they're having the gel and they're drinking 500 mils of water. They're not having the gel and stepping onto the mat to have a match. Right. You know. Right. That's a big change. And then if you drank 500 mils of water as you stepped on the mat, you're not going to have any fun in your match, because if you know you're going to vomit, or you know, if your man has knee on belly, you're going to be sorry. You know. You certainly know more about this than I do, but like I think the thing when I study about and I like look into stuff like this around sports nutrition in particular, it does seem to be very focused on endurance. 100%. So like it's about like running, cycling. There's a lot of stuff out there about that, and it doesn't really get across to like the 5 or 10 minute match.
No, yeah. So it's either you're looking at like max effort sprint or max effort lifts or endurance stuff, and like jiu-jitsu uses all three of our energy systems.
We're such a mixed bag. Like it's very difficult, and it's very difficult to find anything about that. Like, and even when it comes to wrestling and stuff like that, the bouts there are only like 90 minutes long, 90 seconds long.
Yeah.
Sorry, 90 minutes long. That'll be one hell of a match. So like they're still in the very very much in the power region, like you know.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is a great body of work out there for like a 5 to 10 minute match. No. I don't think there's like a great amount.
No, the only thing you can do is look through the literature and pull out stuff that's relevant, which is kind of what I've had to do with even just the making weight, and then the making weight as a woman, looking at different like water retention studies for people with kidney issues, you know, kind of just going, okay, what can I take from this that might apply to water loading?
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
But so that's why it's really important, and a big thing I see in jiu-jitsu as well is people look at bodybuilding nutrition, because that's very lean nutrition, but the bodybuilders, and I've all the respect in the world for bodybuilders, I lived with one for years, he was really a grafter. I went to shows, I put tan on his bum for him, we had a great time. But they're going on stage and they're flexing their muscles for a certain amount of time, and even actually you see when they're getting off stage, I don't know if you've ever walked, I used to love the Mr. Olympia and everything, they're drowning in sweat from the effort, but that's because they're so dehydrated, and that's all the online nutrition, all your Instagram nutrition is all bodybuilding based, so it's low fat, low calorie
for a 30, is it like maximum 2 minutes, I think?
Yeah, and it's an aesthetic sport, and it's really, for most people, I believe it's an expensive way to get yourself an eating disorder, to be honest, you know. But in jiu-jitsu, so you have like, you know, your sprints and your initial interactions and your explosivity, so that's going to burn through your glycogen, your carbs, let's just say. But then as the match continues on, you're gonna get into fat. So if you've been on a low fat diet to get yourself there, again, that will catch up with you. Like, moderation in everything is the way to go for jiu-jitsu, because you're using all energy systems, because it's neither a sprint sport nor an endurance sport, but it also is, because I mean it's endurance in the fact that you might have 5 matches in a day or more if you're doing absolute, you know.
And it's interesting as well, because it kind of does come back to what we were moaning about at the start as well, so it's good we can actually relate it back, because I think a lot of times with young guys, and probably women in particular, women as well, but it does seem to be with young guys as well, it's like, I need to look like a fighter before I go on. And I remember, do you remember Tim Sylvia? Do you remember the UFC heavyweight champion? So do you remember he got caught for steroids?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh wow, okay, you know, and it wasn't a huge surprise for anybody. But he never looked, he was kind of a heavy looking guy. When he came out, he was asked, like, why did you do it? And he goes, I wanted to look good on camera. And that's what it was about.
Nothing to do with his performance.
Yeah, it was nothing to do, because he was already, I think, UFC champ at that stage. And he's like, I just wanted to look good on camera. So essentially he wanted to sell himself as an athlete. Yeah. So he wanted to look good and it looked like the fighter he should have been. And if you see a lot of heavyweight boxers, they're not, modern heavyweight boxers, much leaner, definitely much more, but we're more used to seeing that. But like Tyson Fury doesn't look like a particularly athletic guy, for example, versus Anthony Joshua, who does. But
Anthony Joshua doesn't have a punch in him.
Yeah, so there you go. Who would you pick?
He looks the part, but I'd rather fight him than Tyson Fury.
Yeah, who would you pick? Who would you pick as the greatest boxer of the last like 20 years in heavyweight boxing? Tyson Fury would be up there. Yeah. But, and again, Usyk doesn't look particularly lean, and like he doesn't look like. But a lot of times, I think people look at the sort of guy, you know, when you know he's pulled the gi open at the end, and they see the abs, and they say, well, that's what I have to look like if I want to be good. Yeah. But there's equal parts.
Yeah. And again, they're coming. That idea comes from. Maybe they're looking at striking sports, because they're there's more a depth of history of, say, striking sports than jiu-jitsu with regards to the physique of people that you look for. And like jiu-jitsu, that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu is you can have long and lean limbs, or you can be short and stocky, and both things will work to your advantage in jiu-jitsu. There's no, like, you know, for taekwondo, for example, it's obviously better to be flexible with long legs, right? Yep. That's a given.
I don't think there's a
body type.
A half remembered stat from when I was doing taekwondo. I don't think there was no, I'm going to screw this up. I won't say this as fact, but I think there wasn't a European champ under 6 foot from like 66 kilos up.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah,
I think you had to be like, it was
long
like,
and lean.
or you were like a freak athlete at 5'10".
Yeah.
You were like incredible at 5'10". You were like one of those real standouts. Like,
yeah.
It's
but it's a big problem
jiu-jitsu
with the body image, and like people, and as well people like, because you're peaking to compete, and people then expect they need to look like that year round, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Like, if you're going to be cutting weight, if you're going to enter at what you walk around at, great. You know, if it's a deep division, I'd say you're probably going to do well in that division compared to all the people that are starving beside you, you know. But then the limits of the weight classes come in, like as you said, you know, you're there, well, there's no one in the lat above, there's I can't move age bracket, or if you're in a division that's not usually full, you might be forced to cut a bit of weight when you don't want to, or to go up. Worst thing is when people cut weight and then they move up a division anyway because there's nobody in the division.
No,
you know?
I've done all this work and now I still have to go up and fight this big dude.
It used to be a big thing for me with Daniel Cormier when he was fighting in the UFC and all. I'd be like, this lad's a fat mess, like, you know. But like now, and I actually love him now as a commentator. I find him to be really himself, and people that are really themselves put me at ease. My energy can relax with them people, but I can see it. Because I'm working with it all the time, I can also see the disorder. And I see Daniel Cormier as someone that was wrestling all through his childhood. He's making weight every weekend. He's binging midweek. He still, I guarantee you, if you sat him down, has terrible trouble with food, binge restrict tendencies.
Right. And that probably, not to speak too much, not to speak ill of Daniel Cormier, probably comes off that idea of, I need to be thin, I need to be skinny, I need to be on weight,
look athletic. And I think, did he miss weight for an Olympic qualifier or something like that? I think
there was something like that, if I remember.
Big situation.
It's an interesting one, because if we think about nutrition and we think about, like, I always say, look, you know, what's the difference between a meal prepper and someone with an eating disorder?
Yeah.
Very narrow. It's just, well, if you drop the sport element now, what does it look like preparing all your food and weighing it and doing all this kind of stuff on a Sunday? Now, what's it for? Okay, if you are making weight for a competition, I can see the purpose of that. If you're just making your food for the week on your average day, that's pretty weird behaviour.
I think so, and it's a lot. And I'm very sensitive to the disorder. I can see it all around me, you know. I see it online, see it with a lot of the athletes I work with. So I would be with someone that was like obsessively weighing food, I would be encouraging them to stop weighing food, and like, you know, and the reality is, someone that's obsessively doing that could eyeball food and tell me more what calories are in it than I know, you know, because they know it. But there is an element of, you know, and this is the thing I'm always saying to people, I'm not a chef. People are like, can you send me a meal plan? I'm like, I'm not a chef. I'll tell you what I eat. I'll tell you what I'd like to eat. But what I'd love to do is you tell me what you're eating and me tweak that for you and say, look, I'd actually like if you swap that snack and put it there, you're going 5 hours here without eating after your lunch and work, and then you're heading straight to jiu-jitsu. Is there any chance you could just add in fast-acting carbs for me before jiu-jitsu in the car? Grant, we'll get on with it, you know? Yeah. And then they're not relying on me. Any EJA can do anything for 8 weeks. Anybody can go low calorie, low fat meal plan for 8 weeks, and then they just go back to their norm. I'd much prefer to educate people on performance nutrition. This is what a day you're doing jiu-jitsu in the evening should look like fuel wise. This is what a rest day might look like. This, you know, and if
365 days a year. Is that what you're kind of?
That's what I mean. Yeah. And have that, live in that 80-20, where it's 80% whole foods that are working towards your goals, and 20% we're a human being existing in this world and we want to enjoy ourselves. You know.
Yeah. Which is a nice way to put it, because the obsessiveness kind of works it's a two-way swing, isn't it? So you get the people who can make the obsessiveness work, and I'd imagine they're pretty miserable when they sit down to the dinner table. I doubt they really enjoy that. I'm sure there are some people who do, and I do like eating healthy. Like I can make good food. I'm not too bad in the kitchen. But then there's the other side of that, which is the person who feels shame for not being able to do that as an athlete, and like, oh, I just had this crap today and I ate this and I ate that because I couldn't make it, and I couldn't I couldn't make the food that I wanted to, or I had to eat this. And then you get that, well, you didn't do perfectly, so that's another thing you've got to be bothered about. Yeah,
you're going to beat yourself up. And all I say to people as well is, like, don't attach moral value to food. Like, if we go for lunch now, you're not better than me because you get a salad and I get a pizza. We're just two people that chose our lunch, you know. And I say to my fighters, please just stop saying I was on the wagon, I was off the wagon, or cheat meal this, and all that language. And that's also really important, I say, to coaches and teenagers around children, parents around their children. Don't comment on anybody's body, don't comment on anybody's food. Like, what I work with my athletes is nutrient dense and less nutrient dense.
Right.
You know,
that's not a bad. Nice mnemonic there.
It's not like I said. You're not better than me if you have a salad. You know.
Yeah.
You're just gonna be hungrier than me.
let's get into the teenager part, because I think it's some. Have you, like, do you work with many teens? Do you work kind of?
Not most would be adults, but I do work with teens. Or what I like to do is actually work with parents of teens. So I'd like to not even have the teen on the call. Just work with the parent, because they're the ones cooking the teen's food. They're the ones bringing the kid to training. They're the ones interacting with the coach. You know, so they're the people. Like, if we could hit the parents, we would solve a lot of problems with the teens, I think. You know.
Yeah, because I've it's an area of interest to me now much more than it was. Like, I've always worked with teenagers throughout my coaching career, and actually it's probably my favourite group to work with.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of making their own decisions now. I love coaching young kids.
Yeah.
It's great fun. I really enjoy it. But we bounce off each other, and I'm just basically playing games with them, so it's great. And jiu-jitsu is the best game in the world for me, so it's the most fun thing to do. And as they get to the teenage years now, it's a more complicated problem, because we deal with, like, a lot of other issues that are going on. Obviously, they're having their own sort of independence. They're having their struggles with, like, sort of personality formation and stuff like that, which I like, which sounds weird.
Yeah,
but I do like because, you know, you're finding out what. Especially if you've been coaching the kid for a long time, it's nice to see them kind of emerge from themselves, you know, and who's going to come out the other side. But one of the things that I get asked a lot, of course, is like about nutrition around them by parents and by the kids themselves. Like, how do I do this and how do I do that? And it's always so difficult for me to answer. Anyway, first of all, because I'm not a nutritionist. I don't particularly like to work with food. But the second thing that's the issue is that food is so socially, like, either acceptable or unacceptable. And you're making, like, value judgments, as you said, on, you know, I had Rice Krispies for breakfast this morning. No, what were you doing? You know, it's not something that you can.
No, you need to be so careful, and it's such an age for development of eating disorders in girls and boys as well. And then for boys, it's high suicide time for them, which is a really sad thing to say, but it really is, you know.
Regrettably, yeah. Well, I have two teenage boys, so I know this. In depth.
So when you're assigning anybody's self-esteem or value or worth to anything, it can be quite dangerous, you know. So judging or moral value on anything is really hard. And then, of course, as a teenager, your whole purpose in life is fitting in. So if your pals are going to the garage at lunch in school, you don't want to be the one going, "Oh, lads, I can't get popcorn. I'm cutting weight," or, you know, anything that makes them stand out is their worst bloody nightmare. Like, they're all wearing the same runners, the same trackies, the same hoodie. They've all got the same coat, same hood up, you know.
That has got worse as well. This is a total aside.
Well, because they can see it online as well, you know.
Yeah, so. I wonder. And did you notice everything? We're going way off topic now. Have you noticed that? Do you think there's a thing about the grey and black thing? Like, kids' clothing has been grey and black for the last 5 years. And I'm like, is that just like a total blend in? Like, I can, like, literally stand beside a wall and no one will see me if I just pull my hood up now and put my like, boys in particular, standing out is the worst thing in the world. Like, when you're a teenager, if I stick out, I'm in trouble.
And the thing is, like, when we were kids, if you were standing out, you'd get a slagging in school. It would probably be quite a funny nickname you'd be given. There'd be a bit of a slating or whatever. But then you go home and that's the end of it. Whereas for them, it's not the end of it. It's on their phone. It's there 24/7, you know.
Horrible. Yeah. It's a real... so my wife's a school principal. So I hear the stories, and it's like... And of course I hear them in here and I see them in here. We've actually a no phone zone in here.
Brilliant. I love it.
You're not allowed to have your phone in here. For adults as well as kids.
Yeah, great.
And you're not allowed... So there's nobody... now, we recorded sparring last night. We've got, like, a camp going on at the moment, so we will do a little bit of that, because we need to do a little bit for social media, of course, and stuff. But I
think that's very different, like bringing in the phone to get a few clips of people to promote the gym, for people to see themselves training, their kids training. That's very different than someone that's in there learning a combo thinking, "Oh, I should record this on my phone," you know. The intention behind the recording is important, I think.
We had I've had a couple of incidents over the years, but nothing too serious. But one was a guy hid his phone, so he knew he wasn't allowed to have phone on the mat. He actually, this is a mature man, by the way, this is a man in his 30s. He hid his phone and recorded him sparring with a guy, and of course the guy was less experienced than him, and it was him beating him
So
up,
he was
doing
trying to-
some
yeah.
cool stuff, and it ended up online. We ended up kicking that guy out. I was like, he got a warning for that, and then we ended up booting him for something else as well. And I was like, this is. I remember saying to him at the time, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to do that?
Why is your
What
ego
that?
so fragile? You need to beat up a beginner.
Yeah, and to show
on
online.
record.
Look
Because
how good I
anybody
am.
that knows anything sees that video and says, "Look at that Egypt beating up a white belt." Like,
Yeah.
what's the joy in that?
What are you getting out of this? Like,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But like, so we say to the teenagers, and actually we do it. So the first thing is you can be comfortable that you're not going to appear online.
Yes, yeah, which is very important.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
The second thing we say is when you take your phone out and you're sitting there waiting on class, you're not talking to the person
Yeah,
beside you.
there's
So,
no- yeah.
and the net result is by the time we get them through and they start to join the adults classes, 15, 16, 17, they're coming in and they're quite integrated already.
Yeah,
So they
it's
already know
great.
people from talking beforehand. They haven't
Yeah.
just been sitting there with their head down. So it's quite good. But yeah, to circle back around in terms of kids' nutrition, though, teens' nutrition,
Yeah.
like it's a ropey area,
It is.
like
it
to try
is.
and get into.
And even from a research standpoint, it's very difficult. Like, there's no way to calculate a basal metabolic rate for a teenager or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. It's, if you go to any online calculators, it just starts from 18 or maybe some of them 16, you know.
Okay.
So, but actually, when you look, I found one study I was able to find, and it was based on athletic children, so very active children, and it gave calorie guidelines, and at each age from 10 to 18, boys and girls were needing about 1,000 calories more than adults of
Right.
their, you know,
Okay.
like,
Because
and
of growth
because when you
and-
think they're
yeah.
growing, so we think growing muscles, but growing heart, growing lungs, growing brain, and if you have that child in a calorie deficit to make way for a bloody jiu-jitsu tournament at the weekend, you don't know what damage that's going to do to their brain. We've no studies on that. We don't have any long-term studies, but what we do know, what I know from my own research, is anybody that started making weight as a teenager certainly has a much more disordered relationship with food in their mid-20s, and if they're still competing, they're doing more extreme things to make weight. And actually a lot of people are just stopped competing because they can't deal with the weight element of it.
I wouldn't blame them. Yeah, it's a burnout element then by that stage.
Yeah, and we have to be so careful because generally, say athletes are more prone to eating disorders than Gen Pop, and then weight class based athletes are 3 times more prone to eating disorders than non-weight class or aesthetic based.
I read something a few years ago about jockeys in particular.
Yeah.
And their relationship with food, and some of their weight cutting methods are
crazy
and ridiculous. I'm sure there's more science in it now. I'm certain that it's better. But I do remember
jockeying and lightweight rowing is starting to get a good lot now. There's a good turnaround in MMA at the minute because you have John Connor and stuff, and the fight dietitian there. They have access to the UFC Performance Institute, so they're getting a lot of studies done. But it's still it's based on like 9 men, you know, or 15, you know, so it's very first of all narrow. Like John Connor done a great one there last year, you know, but people use Epsom salts in baths when they're trying to sweat out. So he done a study with 9 lads, and they used Epsom salts in one bath and they didn't in the other bath, and they had the temperature of the bath the same, and what he noticed was there was no significant difference whether you add the Epsom salts or not, which is great, saves people buying Epsom salts. But for me, that was done on 9 men. For women at certain times of their menstrual cycle, they're more prone to water retention, and Epsom salts can help with that. So that study, although great, I'd say to my fighters, look, Epsom salts might help, they might not. So for me, add them into the bath.
Yeah, I think when we're like bad science is, I'm not saying John thinks bad science.
No, it's not. No, but it's just more about the nuance and looking at the nuance. Instead of people see a headline, stop using Epsom salts, when they don't read into the actual study and the study design, you know.
And I'm sure if you asked him now, he would say, well, look, it was only on 9 guys.
He'd say, I'd love to repeat it on a mass scale.
On a mass scale, and get it out there.
Yeah.
But again, we don't have that level of data out there, and it's very difficult. So when we look at like teens, for example, but like even just from looking at teenagers, if I start with a teenage boy and what he looks like at 12 versus what you think he's going to look like at 18, it's usually completely different.
And then the speed at which they go through puberty as well is very genetically based, you know. So
I'm going to say something about my son now, and if he reads that, he's going to be like, oh. If he listens to this, he's going, oh.
You're making a show of him.
He used to go out to go up. So he's 6'4".
Okay, right.
He's almost 20, and he's 6'4". And so he would go out, and we would go, God, he's put on a, you know, and we'd be kind of like, you know, let's keep him away from the jellies for a little bit. But then we noticed the pattern. It was like
out and up.
So
my
he'd get
nephew's
heavy,
the same,
and then he'd grow, and then he'd get heavy, and they'll grow. Now he's like big specimen, like, you know. And so whenever we're looking, but now that versus that, his brother doesn't. He's just gone up. He's just going straight up. He's like a beanpole. But so you don't really know. Like when you're looking at kids, oh my god, I'm worried about their weight. I'm worried about what size they are. Oh my god, is she fat? Is he fat? Oh, is he gonna end up? And the huge thing in parenting, I suppose. It's so. Like, what age are you 2, by the way?
2 and 8.
2 and 8. So you're probably getting it there with the 8-year-old, right? But obviously, you've got a good deal of experience with people you've been meeting professionally as well.
Yeah.
But like, you've probably noticed that, again, what we were speaking about earlier is like, are you a perfect parent if your child is overweight or not doing gymnastics or not doing 17 activities a week?
Yeah.
What should you be doing with them? What should they look like at this age, at that age? And I'm like, whoa, just slow down. Slow down. They'll be fine as long as you do the basics right.
I think before puberty, so say like up to 10, if a child is very overweight, they are genuinely overweight and something's gone amiss there and there's a calorie imbalance. But I think once they hit puberty, I'm trying to remind parents, as you would say for your son, what they look like at 14 is not indicative of what they look like at 20 or 18, and like you said, might be growing out to grow up, and how hormones present themselves in people's bodies is very different. And you've got 2 sons, like, you know, and they both went through that very differently. So what I try to say to people is, don't get attached to a weight class with a kid, because that can be very dangerous, you know. Because big problem, I remember when I used to be involved in the Irish kickboxing, they'd have the qualifiers, say, in January for the Worlds in November, and the kid would be 3 kilos heavier through no fault of his own. He's just after growing, you know. And and then you have parents, like, scarily, I had a parent last year reach out to me about her daughter needing to cut 6 kilos, and that this was a 9-year-old or something.
9.
And I was saying, I was trying to advise. I said, could she not just move up a category so that there's someone qualified for the next division so she won't get to go? And in the most polite way possible, trying to say, she just shouldn't go. She's after growing out of that weight class, health. And there's no, and that's 6 kilos. We're not talking about a 90 kilo 9-year-old. We're talking about a 45 kilo. You know, that's a big percentage.
That's a massive percentage. Yeah.
But then and again, no malice on that parent's fault. Just being in weight cut sport, seeing people cutting weight, not kind of knowing any better, thinking, okay, this is a big opportunity for my child. We need to make this happen. Yeah. And not being able to take a step back and say, oh fuck, hold on a second here.
Long-term health might trump whatever short-term gain there is from this.
Because you know the gymnasts, for example, they don't go to puberty till they stop competing and stuff like that, and they're all very, very short. And we don't know how that will impact their later life. Well, we do. We know that they'll be riddled with injuries. But we don't know with regards to brain development, muscular development, organ development. You know.
Yeah, that's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. That's extraordinary.
So I try to go with fueling. We're teaching these kids how to fuel themselves for training. So if you've got a kid that's the usual kid up for breakfast, maybe having cereal or toast, they're bringing a lunch to school, it might be a sandwich and fruit, then they're coming home and having something else, and then they're going to jiu-jitsu. So I just try and make it, okay, I need them to have more protein. So if they're having cereal and toast in the morning, can they add, I don't know, ham to their toast, or can they have a fried egg on their toast, or can it be protein milk in their cereal? Very easy swaps, get some protein into them. It'll help them concentrate in school better. You can say that to them. Like, you need to get the buy-in. With athletes, kids, adults, parents, everybody, you get the buy-in, you know. And then I'm like, if this kid's going to be gone from 5 till 8 p.m. at all their activities, okay, well, I need you to give them their dinner at 4:30 then. And then they can have something after training lighter, because you don't want them coming in and having a full roast dinner at 9 p.m. either, and then sending them to bed, you know. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Well, let's take a pause there for a second. Maybe we'll get back into kids weight cutting dangers and stuff like that, and because actually it did come up last weekend, and it's something that I wouldn't mind having a chat about. Let's go from kind of the phenomenon, I suppose, of teenagers weight cutting. You're talking about like development, hindering so physical development, brain development even. At a younger age, like we're talking below the age of 10, it's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? The concept that you'd be doing that, but there's a lot of damage we can do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's even, so you get your, like, what they call your pre-androgens, so your hormones before your puberty hormones coming in from kind of age 6 up to 10. So again, you're just really affecting, and all of that stuff is laying down the foundation for your body to develop, your bones, you know, your organs. It just blows my mind, to be honest. Kids should just fight at what they weigh, you know. It's that simple. And I understand they might fall between a weight category, but honestly, at that age, the muscle mass is so small. It's not like me saying, I'll go into the the plus 79 division as a woman, and I fight a woman that's 90 kilos and I'm only say 80 kilos. This is 2 kids, and one of them might be 20 kilos and one of them might be 23, and between the two of them they might have 8 kilos of muscle mass. It's
incredible.
just
Just
at that age it's mostly their head is the heaviest part of their body.
And like and even coming down to that, like, I mean, we're talking about what's in the head. It's your brain, right? And
100%. Yeah. And then there's the big thing people talking about, mental health with teenagers and stuff like that. And when we talk about brain development, people think their ability to do maths, but you're talking about their ability to process emotions, their ability to deal with anxiety, to deal with stress. The pathways that are going to signal from their brain to whatever part of their body they're going to talk to, they're all been laid out and developed then. So they need a calorie surplus, certainly not a calorie deficit.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of concept of we spoke a little bit off camera about people living vicariously through their kids, and obviously that's a major problem in sport, and I think sports like football have had it for a long time. I've only ever really noticed it in the last when I started coaching taekwondo. It didn't exist. People brought their children to taekwondo to learn a martial art, to learn a life skill, to enjoy themselves, to be fit and healthy. That was the way it kind of worked. I never experienced people bringing their child there to be a taekwondo world champion. It never happened. Then when the big explosion in MMA happened, I started to get more and more parents, more and more dads bringing their sons up and saying, are you going to train him? Yeah, I want him to be a professional fighter. And I'm going, oi.
Does he probably still want to be a fireman or something?
Yeah, I think he probably wants to play Lego.
Wants to be a spaceman.
But I never had anything like that. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Now now I don't coach MMA anymore, so I don't see it anymore. But now I'm starting to see it in jiu-jitsu. And I see it more commonly now when I go around the world or go around Europe and I see kids tournaments and I see parents of kids and I go, oh, so it's here now too, right? That's interesting because do they know there's no money in this?
I mean, there's the 1% of people can make money, and there's a thing on Netflix I watched the other day about kid influencers, and it feels like the same thing. It's like parents have realised maybe that they can make money out of this. I'm not saying the parent wants the money, but they want their kid, and of course as a parent you want your kid to be the best they can be. And like, there's a conversation I had with Bodhi the other day. He said to me, I think I want to be a world champion when I'm older, and he didn't even know in what. He just said it, and he said, and you know what, it'll probably be jiu-jitsu because I don't think you can be a world champion in Pokemon. And I was like, and I just said, you know what, bud, you can be a world champion in anything if you put in the work. So that's where I take the conversation. You put in the hard work, you get the rewards. Not talking about anything that comes with being world champion, because I mean, I spent, kickboxing was my first martial art, and I spent all of my teens and all of my 20s chasing belts, chasing world titles, and I won them all and didn't enjoy a single minute of it. As soon as I get out of the ring, new belt, I'm like, what's next? And so that's what I love about jiu-jitsu now. Jiu-jitsu is my retirement martial art, where I'm like, I'm not trying to be the best in the world of jiu-jitsu. I'm trying to be present and thoroughly enjoy learning this new skill. And that's what I'd love parents to let their kids to do, because that'll keep me in jiu-jitsu forever. And all those kids, when I was teaching kickboxing, a lot of the young phenoms, when they were 6, 7, 8, winning gold medal this, gold medal that, they weren't training by the time they were 14.
Yeah, I think it's common. I think it's common with football. I think it's common with all sports. Where it comes too easy to them, which I think is a huge problem. So I was speaking to a guy a couple of years ago who works with a professional academy in the UK, so soccer, football. And he was saying the easier it comes to them, the harder it is to get them to train. So if it comes easy to them, they've always been like a phenomenon. Then they find life when they arrive at an academy where everybody is a phenomenon. They find life
very
really
difficult. And of course not learning how to lose, or like the pressure of being expected to be the best in the room, and not learning how to process the complicated emotions with not performing at your best or not winning, or and then the idea that all your value as a human is based on your wins. That's very hard.
That's a very
and
difficult
a kid
one.
Can't process that. Adults find that hard to process, but kids.
And it's strange how actually in football, for example, or in rugby and in all of the you call them established sports, and certainly in a lot of the Olympic sports, The concept is moving away from that idea. So, for example, they don't record scores now in a lot of underage football matches. So, especially if the kids getting trashed. You know,
we don't need to know it was 22-0.
Yeah, we don't need to know that. So they don't record scores. There's like a lot of subbing in and subbing out of the, you know, everybody gets equal playing time, all of this kind of stuff. But it hasn't filtered down to the parental level yet. No. So the local level, but it will. I think it will. The culture takes a long time to change. Yeah. But now we're in less established sports, and you can see that. You can see that vicarious living. You can see it happening, and it's so difficult to deal with. We've got a nice kind of operation here where we don't really have that very much, but we have had it on occasion. And it's difficult to drill out of people. Because,
I know, and I like to always think people are doing stuff with the best of intention, and these parents just want their kid to thrive.
Of course,
and it takes someone that can step back and look at the bigger picture and point out to them that this kid will thrive regardless. That they don't need to be at every competition every weekend. They don't need to be doing 7 activities that they actually could do it a day on the sofa with their mum and dad. They could do it a rest day. They certainly don't need to be cutting weight. They want to just be a kid. Let them go out and play football with their pals. Not to be good at football, just to kick a ball and annoy the neighbour or something.
Just to enjoy themselves. Literally enjoy it. I always come back to there's 2 things actually about. One I was going to say to you earlier. I'll tell you that one in a second. The first one is when they did a study on NFL players. The top NFL players a number of years ago, what they found is that most of them didn't specialise until they were 16. So they had done a lot of sports. They'd played soccer, they'd play baseball, they'd play basketball, and they'd swam, they did everything. And it was only when it came time for college drafting and stuff like that that they went, well, okay, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to pick the one I'm best at or the one I enjoy the most.
And it's big business in America. Their college fees are astronomical, you know.
Massive. So to try and go and do that, and those were all the successul ones. When they looked at the specialisers, they didn't do as well. So like multi-sport kids and playing to play and playing for enjoyment does seem to be the way to go. The second one I was going to say to you was, which is kind of funny, which is a guy I used to work with. He got a scholarship. He got a football scholarship to the University of California, which was quite difficult at the time. But in his teenage years, he needed mass, so he needed weight. So the coach was like, "Okay, you need to eat more, you know." And it said the nutrition guidelines at the time were eat more food. That's was it, right? So he said like, are you eating like candy bars in between things? So he was trying to get him to eat like chocolate, you know. Before, So he was doing this. He was eating candy bars, and eventually he sits him down, and he's like 17 years of age, and he goes, "Listen, why don't you have a couple of beers?"
Oh, Jesus Christ!
I'm not saying get hammered. But there's a lot of calorie in beer, so he's trying to encourage him to drink. And he said, people would say to me like, "That bullshit." He said, I'm telling you, absolutely, that's true. He said, not saying get hammered. I'm saying like have a couple of beers, put on a little bit more bulk. That's what all the guys are doing. He said, that's what all the guys were doing. He said, they were.
No thought for the inflammation caused in his young body as it grows. And like I had a rugby player come to me before, and he was on the Leinster junior team, and he had been told he had to put on 5 kilos, and like to say to a kid to put on 5 kilos, the kids don't dictate, you know, unless you're going to chemically enhance them, which is a whole other conversation.
Another one we can go into another time.
But he had been given a food sheet, and thankfully he had the wherewithal to be like, because he came from a family that ate well, they were all rugby players, so they had a good idea of stuff, and it was all like have a chocolate muffin and jam on toast and have this as your 11th break, and it was just all shite calories, you know.
Right.
And I was saying to him, I was like, look, you might gain some weight, but it's not going to be efficient weight, like it's not going to be useful weight. It's going to, like, what formula has that coach decided 5 kilos on your body is going to make you a better prop? Like, you know, like, why did he land at 5 kilos? I'd love to be like, show me the algorithm. What is it about this 6-foot kid that means his rugby gets 10% better if he puts on 1 kilo, 20% better if he puts on 2? Like, where's the, what are you on about? You've just decided a good prop weighs 80 kilos, you know?
And it's interesting, I think, the way the game changes as well, and not to go to rugby or anything like that, but you can see Dan Sheehan is Dan Sheehan 6 foot? I don't know. Would he be? You know,
rugby's not as strong.
Okay, right.
But team sports aren't my jam.
I think he's got like I don't think it's 100 meters, but he's got an extremely fast 60
Sprint.
meters, right? So or whatever it is, a 40-meter sprint or anything like that, and he moves like a back. So he moves like he's and he's not huge, he's not massive, and like so it's always like, well, why are we saying these? Why are we giving these kind of arbitrary numbers to things? Well, you need to be this size, and for us, it's you need to be this light. The lighter, the lower
lighter
down.
is always better. Yeah.
So we're giving these arbitrary numbers, but we're not allowing for like let's see what happens when you're this size and when you're when you're grown and when you're fully developed. Now let's have a look and see what you're like.
Yeah.
What do you look like now? Interestingly, on that point, I think is like when it comes down to selecting your weight class, there's a thing that I like, which is you should. A saying that I like, which I'd heard it, I kind of worked with it before, like, but I'd only ever heard it put really well, like recently, which was play to your strengths and only work on your weaknesses when they're holding you back. Yeah. So if you think about it from a weight class perspective, it's like, well, be who you are and only change your weight class if it's holding you back. So maybe. And my example of that when I'd speak to guys in the gym here would be, if you're not really looking after your diet, maybe now is the time to change your weight class. So if you are walking around over fat as opposed to overweight, maybe you should have a look at that.
Well, this is it. And then why don't you I always say to people, just if you're eating like a toddler, let's start eating like an adult. And then let's see where your body lands, and then we can make a decision there. So it's correct. And that might be the case with kids. If a kid is like a half a kilo or a kilo above their weight class, but they're just eating sweets all day long, or whatever the thing might be, if it's a small little adjustment that's going to say, okay, let's get 3 square meals and 2 good snacks into this kid and they'll get a kilo off just naturally, that's very different to someone that's got an already lean, very active kid and they're already restricting their food and they're trying to get them to cook. And then the other thing that drives me nuts is all of the fight week protocols that you would implement. So like on the fight week protocols, before fight week, you're trying to get the person to drop fat. On fight week, they should be on maintenance calories and you're just manipulating what their body weighs. You're not going to lose any fat that week, right? Yeah. So what we're doing is manipulating what your body weighs by messing with your glycogen and your body water. And that's all based on muscle mass. Trying to implement an adult fight week protocol onto a bloody 12-year-old that hasn't got much muscle mass at all is unnecessarily harmful, dangerous and miserable, and it's just never going to work. So they're like, of course such and such can sweat off 2 kilos, and you're like, can he? Can he really?
Yeah.
He weighs 40 kilos, so 2 kilos is 5% of his body weight.
And what are what are you basing that off? Yeah. Where did you get this science? Because you're a nutritionist and you haven't read it, so they must be pulling it out of somewhere. Let's change tack then. Let's go. Let's talk about let's not talk about me.
But you still haven't given me a day's eating, actually.
Will I go for it?
Go on.
Okay. So I start my day with coffee.
Nice. Okay. We don't hate coffee here. Okay. We just like people to not mistake it for fuel.
Oh.
Coffee is a psychological stimulant.
All right. Can I start again? Right. That's interesting. Okay.
So I start my day workout with coffee.
So I start my day with a psychological stimulant, and it kind of goes on in that vein for the foreseeable future. No, so I try to do this thing. So for me, it's about 200 grams of protein a day, right? So approximately. So if I hit 170, I'm usually pretty happy, because of life. You know.
Yeah.
So I start my day. My breakfast. But I actually hate breakfast. That's my first thing. I don't really like eating breakfast. I don't like eating early in the morning. I don't like normal breakfast meals. I'll actually sometimes have what people would term a dinner in the morning. So I would have eggs or
steak and eggs or something like that.
Steak and eggs, stuff like that. Yeah. If there's leftover chili from the night before, chili and eggs. Oh my God. So I'll have that at around sort of 10 or 11 o'clock. Yeah. And usually that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to hit about 120 grams of protein before 12 o'clock.
Okay, that's a lot, yeah. It's good though, but it gives you a head start,
Yeah, because
so there's a lot of between scientists now, they're all arguing. Scientists love to argue or something. So the argument is it more important that in 24 hours you get X amount in, or is it more important that you spread it in such a way across the day for protein to work best for you? And for me, I like to go practical, and for me, it's however you're going to get it in is the best way to get it in.
Right.
You know,
okay.
so if I said to you, you actually have to split that into 40-gram portions throughout your day, chances are you're not going to hit anything.
No, I wouldn't hit it at all. No, I wouldn't get there.
So for me, how does Barry get his protein in? That's the best way to get it in.
Okay, so cramming it in early, it's not wrong. So if I, because it's like, and you can answer this and explain this better than me, the danger for me that I worry about is, because I know if I go 120 in the morning, I know, because all my activities in the evening, right? So most of my activities in the vast majority.
Yeah.
I lift weights in the morning, stuff like that. So that's not necessarily true. Like early afternoon, but like my teaching, my training, my jiu-jitsu is in the evenings. So my chances of eating anything close to even like 80, 90 grams in the evening, it's really slim. I'm not going to get that opportunity to do that. What I'm going to get the opportunity to do is have a quick cereal bar, something like that here. I'm not going to be able to have a full meal. And any protein I have is going to sit in my stomach and really affect my training. So I try to get it early. I know through my own knowledge, right, that it's difficult for that, very, very difficult. It takes a complex biological process for that protein to turn into fat. So I'm pretty happy that I'm not going to get fat from eating a lot of protein in one sitting. But I'm concerned about the other things that are part of those meals. So if I'm sitting there eating, for example, steak and eggs, or well, steak and eggs would be fine, but let's say, for example, like a normal sort of breakfast thing, like with maybe like some granola with like Greek yogurt and some bit of fruit or whatever it is.
Lovely.
And then I'm having something else very, very quickly afterwards. Now I'm kind of concerned, well, hold on, there's sugars in there, and I'm not going to be very active in the next while. Am I putting myself in danger?
No, because you are very active, and the chances are you're probably not even eating enough calories for your level of activity.
We're getting deep in here.
But no, sure, your body's going to take the time to store that and have it ready for you later in the evening, you know. There's a big mistake people make. They always ask me, like, on my rest day, should I reduce my calories, or I'll go low carb on my rest day? And I'll say, you can do if you've recovered from your last session on the day before your rest day properly with a carby meal, and you're not going to train first thing the next day, because people like to think I'm not active so my body doesn't need calories, but what they don't think is, I can imagine with you, it was actually lifted yesterday morning and trained in the evening, jiu-jitsu, so what does my body need to recover today on my rest day? Calories.
Right.
You know? So I'm not a big fan of reducing calories on rest days or reducing carbs. Like, definitely the carbs will naturally be reduced because they won't be adding in their fast-acting carbs before they train. But I'm more so interested in just giving your body a stable amount of what it needs and letting your body then be at rest and at ease with things.
I'm not a fan of restricting calories at all, oddly enough.
But what I do with people that are on the go, and they're like, they might have an office job. I have, like, a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes tend to be PTs or masseuses or therapists, or they tend to work with people as well. So obviously they're not going to be able to, between clients, whip out some like tuna and whatever, you know. So, but I'll get them to have a liquid meal for me. So I'll say to them, can you make a protein shake, and you can either put peanut butter or cream in it, and could you please put some fruit, banana, berries, whatever you want. And now we have about 400 calories in a drink, and it's socially, like, I could have been drinking that here. It's socially acceptable to drink if you're on Zooms all day in the office, but you haven't left yourself go too long without eating, and then you become that ravenous hungry, and then you make bad choices. You know?
The bad decisions. I'm prone to that as well.
So
obviously,
you could probably be doing that when you arrive here for the kids' class. You could be drinking a smoothie that has protein in it and fruit and fats. And that is sometimes my morning. I generally speaking, that's where I would kind of. I don't like. I take creatine in tablet form sometimes, and sometimes in smoothie form. So I'll just like lash it into the shake, and that tends to be my morning before lifting weights. So that's my pre-weights. My big gap then is between picking up my daughter from school and then almost sometimes nighttime. So I'm talking 3 o'clock. And I might not eat till 9 p.m. Yeah, that's too long to go without food. And you've done a jiu-jitsu class in that, right?
Yeah, I'll either have trained or I'll have coached, but I've coached for a long time. What's the maximum I should go?
3 hours is what I like people. I say now. Of course, and listen, I don't want to be that 20-year-old personal trainer that's telling people they need 6 small meals a day and to prep it. But you could, like, if you just added in your fast-acting carbs there before your own bit of training or something, or if you'd done a shake, that'd be perfect. But what happens is people get into what I call in-day calorie deficits. So you've had, say, a huge breakfast and then you've lifted. So we've had that activity, and then you've whatever brain activity you've had. You've collected your daughter, you've ran the house, you've done business bits and bobs. You've taught a class, 2 or 3 classes, and you might have rolled or drilled. And you've had no more calories in that. So we now have 2 training sessions and life admin on just the calories from your breakfast.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be just the calories from my breakfast, because I would snack, and usually my snacks are pretty poor choices, if I'm honest, right? Because when I'm on, I'm really on. So if I'm on, I'm like, okay, it's rice cake and peanut butter, and it's like I'm on. When I'm off, in other words, I'm not thinking about a tournament, I'm not thinking about like how I'm training. I'll just eat whatever's in the press, and it's just, and I know for a fact as I'm doing it, I'm going, this is because I'm starving. And I'm just,
it's easy, and it's actually not going to even fulfill the need you're looking for at the minute, but it's just what I always say to people is lead with protein. So if you are going to have a snack, say you're getting a bar out of the press, just get yourself a little bowl of Greek yogurt for me, eat the Greek yogurt, and then if you want the bar, have the bar. And because protein is the most satiating of all of the macronutrients, it keeps you fuller. So when people spread their protein nicely throughout their day, they tend to eat less. But you're at risk of falling into a trap that I see people fall in all the time, is eating way too low during the day and arriving to their dinner absolutely ravenous. So then they eat their dinner and they start eating everything else.
That would be common. I eat. It seems to me like I eat all day, but when I go back and like I calculate it and I go, I'm actually still not getting there. I'm still not getting there in calories, and I'm still not getting there in protein in particular. And I'm like, how am I not getting there? So I end up putting a lot of effort in with like crap that I don't really like. So like I'll put a lot of effort in with, like, for example, I don't like protein shakes and I don't like protein bars, but I'll go, okay, I have to have one because I'm trying to get to that level. I'm trying to tip that over the edge.
There's just looking at some things like I would lean on protein powder a fair bit, and it's a question I get off from people, like, and I have people that actually just don't like the taste of it. That's pretty cool. Some people have unflavoured, which to me makes them a psychopath, but whatever.
I'm unflavoured, but I put a banana in with it
to give
so it's like but I can't stand the flavours of any of them.
Like
so they're all like feel sickly the flavouring. Sweet. It's horrible. But
what I do remind people when they're worried about protein powder is it's the first ingredient in baby formula is whey protein. So it's not, you're being led to believe again by all these influencers that anything that's processed is going to kill you, but good protein powder will have the source of protein, so be it whey or beef or whatever, if you're going for soy or pea, if you're vegan or whatever, and then it should have a stabilizer, and if it's flavoured, a flavouring. So if your protein powder has a long list of ingredients, it's probably a shite, but if it has 4 or 5 ingredients, that's fine, and just look at the source, because we're so spoiled in Ireland with the grass-fed beef and stuff, like the sources of the protein are really good for us. But people that don't like that, I'll say, okay, so you're having steak and eggs, could you throw in some prawn on top of that steak? And then we've increased the protein, but we've not really added very many calories, or edamame beans, could you just snack on them during the day? They're quite high in protein, low in calories, and just start getting those little hacks for yourself whereby you're just adding a little bit more protein each time,
without kind of totally changing your diet and totally changing your lifestyle, which is a big problem I think that people have. I think, like, obviously there's a lot of people out there who need to change their lifestyle along with it, like, I mean, you've obviously worked with them as well, where they've got they're not worrying about how much protein they're getting in. It's a total sea change in terms of how they eat.
I work with a lot of Americans, and a good portion of them just never cook. They just eat out for all 3 meals, and
that's insane to me. That's incredible. I think we're getting to a phase in where growing up, I watched people cook meals all the time. I watched my mom cook all day. That's how I learned how to cook, was watching. And I'd just be there, and I'd be, the knife would get handed to me all the time, or the peeler, or whatever it was, and you're part of the meal, and you grow up with that. I cook all day, so my wife works all day, so I do the cooking. I'm the meal cooker, and my kids watch me cook all day, so that's what they do. But we're at a stage where possibly you're like 2 generations removed from that. So your mother didn't cook meals, or made ready-made boxed meals. and her mother didn't make meals, or father didn't make meals, or whatever it was. So now you're like 2 generations away from,
nobody cooking.
Nobody cooking.
Yeah,
Never seen it actually happen. So it's the education there is huge. That's an
and
education
it's just been
gap.
a part of the day. And like Austin's great. Austin does most of our cooking at home as well. But we're really lucky. But it's a decision we made with regards to our own working hours that we one of us at home with kids. So we're. Our kids are home for breakfast, lunch and dinner with us, you know what I mean? Except Bodie has his lunch in school. But and they both have very different palates, which is really funny, as well. But yeah, it's just the not cooking. And then, like I say to people, they people want to work with me and they're like, okay, I need you to figure this out. I need to make weight a bit easier, but I'm not willing to change anything. And I'm like, well, sounds like we've got no work to do here then. Because
our work here is done.
Well, I'm like, I need you to start cooking some meals, and but even for someone like you, which would make a huge difference for you, but just a little bit more forethought into your snacks. So like stock up on protein heavy snacks like protein yogurts. Throw some nut granola in a protein yogurt to give it some texture. It's delicious. That's my go-to. Whatever it might be for you that you can have here, like the...
Yeah, that's the real problem is the on-the-go stuff. And if I have a busy day, or if I have a busy few days where I'm going to different meetings and I'm traveling around, there's no car food that I would enjoy, and there's nothing when I walk into a day or I walk into a shop. It's like, that's no.
I know.
I'm not going to have a sandwich. I don't want a pre-packed sandwich. I don't want anything like this.
I know. You go up to the hot counter and you're looking at the chicken, saying, "I don't know.
Yikes.
I don't like how that looks." So it's just a bit of forethought. That's all it is, And
how about oily fish? I'm oily canned fish though. That's the one thing that I eat in great quantity, which is the bane of everyone else in my house's existence.
I think it's great. I think it's a mackerel. So my dogs eat it actually. They love it as well, and I think it's a great high protein on the go if you don't mind the smell of it.
The smell, which people do. It's probably not socially acceptable.
No, but if you're in the car on your own,
maybe. Oh God, yeah, I've
really
done
good.
that.
People like to worry about things and make things really stressful, like about mercury and fish and stuff like that. So just the smaller the fish, the less their ability to store that type of stuff. So that's why the likes of your mackerel and your sardines are really great. And you don't need to be getting organic mackerel because mackerel can't store toxins.
Okay, that's
Whereas
interesting.
if you're getting a huge tuna steak, or the bigger fish. Well, to be honest, it's not. I think again we're quite spoiled in Ireland, but I do understand people in America having trouble buying high quality beef, high quality fish, and it's outrageously expensive as well.
It's something weird that do you remember the bulletproof coffee phase there a while back, and everyone was going, "Oh, you need to get grass-fed butter," and my mom, isn't all butter grass-fed? And then you find out how they feed the cows over and it's bone meal and it's stuff like that over in the States, and you go, oh,
I know. I have to check my privilege often when I'm chatting to American clients about it. We are spoiled rotten with our availability. Like I'm eating a cow that lived in Wicklow, you know, and I'm eating vegetables that were picked from a farm 10 minutes away, and it's really not like that for a lot of the
for
Americans.
a lot of Americans and a lot of the world as well, I suppose, but we obviously we kind of live in an agricultural country, and we have that ability to have that grass-fed butter was the big thing. That was like, grass-fed, it's all grass-fed. No, wait, it's not. Oh my God,
even know butter ate grass. What is this?
How do we get there? But I think and a lot of times as well when we're reading sort of research and you're looking at people online, they're talking about, for example, mercury or or like a deficiency in omega-3s and stuff like that. You might not necessarily have that. It might be okay, because again, a lot of the studies are based in
the States. Like there was a big thing. Do you remember the China study on red meat years ago?
Yes,
And so the people that don't publish that study have actually been prosecuted since. So it was like criminally negligent. The study, the way they made it biased, but it was basically like red meat's going to kill you. It's going to give you a heart attack. They link red meat to heart attack. But actually, when you look into the study, besides all the actual manipulating of the numbers, it's people read a headline and they think that that's a conclusion, and it's like actually in America, first of all, it's in America. Red meat in America is not red meat in Europe. Let's just say it was canned processed meats. Generally, people that eat that tend to also smoke and drink a lot more, and it's like it's coming in a cheeseburger form, So it's like
if you're eating meat from a can,
if you're
you have some other issues.
So if you're comparing like your steak and eggs breakfast to someone having like a canned I don't know, canned beef that's probably 3% beef and 97% Lord knows what.
Yeah.
And they're having it on a bun with cheese that's probably also about 3% cheese, 97% Lord knows what.
Yeah.
You can't compare the two, you know. So, of course, red meat can be problematic if you're eating kilos and kilos of it and not taking in fibre with it. And it's very low quality, but I think people then they take this stuff on board and then they stress themselves out and they're afraid. And then I often think, like, would you ever leave the house? If you read every study that told you every danger, where do you draw the line, you know?
Yeah, and like bad science, we spoke about good science earlier, like, but it's everywhere. And my cousin pointed out, she pointed out to me one time, one of her favourite things to do was point out the studies at the bottom of hair advertisements. You know, 73% of 19 women agreed. I was like, how do you even get 73% of 19? That's an impossible thing.
Third of one of the women agreed.
Yeah, it's like, what happened? You know, if you ever look at those things, like it's and a lot of them as well are, of course, commercially driven. There's people behind them.
And they're funded,
they're well funded.
And it's a skill reading a study. Like, even when I started my masters, I was like, oh, this is easy. And then I was like, they were teaching us how to read a study and, you know, take from it what's useful. Is it a strong study? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? You know, all of the little nuances that TikTok's not telling you in 90 seconds.
Yes, yeah. Well, look, we need to finish up. We didn't get to some of the stuff we were going to do, but it was a really interesting chat. But look, you know, it goes where it goes, I suppose, some days. But let me finish up with a quick fire one then. Let's do a couple minutes on this. If I was a new client coming to you, your average new client walking into you or meeting you online or whatever you're doing, what is the number one mistake I'm making?
Meal timing.
Interesting.
Meal timing for performance,
Okay. I would thought you were immediately. My first thing was she's going to say protein requirements. She's going to say low protein.
No, like it depends. I get that, and then not eating enough calories. Well, not eating. They are in a surplus without realizing, but not eating enough calories leading to a binge. That's a big thing, you know. But meal timing is always the first thing that I adjust to get the buy-in from the client, to get the trust. Because if I send them to their martial arts class with the correct fuel in them, they feel 100 times better, and then they're like, okay, I trust her, I'm going to do what she asks of me. So that's what I use to get the buy-in, is the meal timing.
Amazing. Okay.
And water, actually, nobody's ever drinking enough water.
Yeah, that's but did me ask you a general question about a hypothetical person? Let's say they got a lot of coffee.
Coffee doesn't count as water.
Right, okay. Well, listen, it's been great. Thanks very much for coming in.
Just actually, before we finish up, I feel like, because I want this to be useful for people,
right.
is the fight week stuff for jiu-jitsu practitioners. So basically for the close weigh-in, there is protocols you can do, but they just need to be very gentle. So a big one that we use is what I would call a soft water load. So for someone doing a full water load for a day before weigh-in, we would start their water at maybe like 50 to 60 mils per kilo of body weight, and we would increase that for 4 days, and then we would reduce to 15 mils per kilo for the last low day, and then they'd have the weigh-in the next day, like on the 6th day. For someone doing jiu-jitsu, I would kind of half that a little bit. So I would say I would get them at like 30 to 40 mils, and we would gradually increase that, and then on their so-called low day we would hit 25 mils per kilo of body weight. So it's kind of, because we don't want to put them into a full state of dehydration, because a water load by proxy is kind of dehydrating you, because you're flooding your system and you're not replacing the salts and the electrolytes. And and you can look at getting 2-3% of your body weight off doing just that.
Okay.
You know, if you've got a good level of muscle mass. And then the other thing is just to switch up the carbs to low fibre carbs. So we call that a low residue protocol. So, and I do this 3 days beforehand. Research says it causes no issues long term or anything like that. But what you do is your gut basically carries about 2% of your body weight in roughage. So when you're eating stuff, it's adding in, it's taking time to pass through. So what we just do is we change all our carbs to white sources. So white rice, white bread, white pasta, whatever, white potatoes. And it just means the roughage carries on passing through, and we're not replacing and repopulating, but we still are getting carbohydrates. We can make glycogen and we can fight. We can, you know, our muscles will work. So we'd look at like less than 10, 15 grams of fibre a day. And things that work really well is like I said, the whites for the carbs and skins, but with fruits with no skins or seeds and stuff like that, because that's where the fibre lives in your fruit. So things like, a lot of my athletes love applesauce. It's really low in fibre and it's really sweet, so it gives them that sweet kick. So they might have applesauce like just literally in a jar, or they might have it on a rice cake or something like that, you know.
Right. Because that would be a surprise to a lot of people, because what they're told is white goods bad. So white breads, white powders, white rice, white pasta. You've been told this for I don't know how long. Like, this is bad. We need to be getting, everything needs to be brown rice and brown bread and everything like that. So when they're told, no, because I've told people that, and they've looked at me going, no, I don't believe you. But thankfully you've said it now. So and this is like, obviously we want you eating fibre year round, but this is just fight week manipulation stuff, This is within the last couple of days.
And I also like a lot of people online will be, they can be what I call like snobbish about food. And of course we have a new eating disorder now called orthorexia, where people are just obsessed with clean eating. And that's where the social media is going. And the reality of the demands of an athlete, and also an athlete that has a job, is for them to hit what they need to hit for their body to function properly, there's going to be some processed food in their day. I mean, it's very, even just to get the calories they need in, like, because we know there's feck all calories in vegetables and stuff like that. If you're eating meat and veg and carbs all day long, you're as a 90 kilo man, you're going to find it hard to get your calories in. So I like to, again, be practical and reality. 80-20, 80% whole foods, 20% functionality.
Whatever's available. That's great. That's really good. And as a follow-up question, because we are way over time, but it doesn't matter. We've been really, it's been really interesting.
If someone's listened to us for this long, I should give them something useful.
I don't know. I was trying to think, when we finished one, I was like, how much shit did we talk versus how much content is in there? But I think this is pretty content dense, so I think it's been really, really good. So I think people probably are going to have to give this a couple of listens and a couple of rewinds if they're looking for the detail. But with that soft water load and with that fibre reduction, how much percentage of body weight do you think?
Depending on the person's muscle mass, could be between 3 and 5% with the two of those done together. And what I like to remind people as well is, if they do a water load well, it leads to very easy sweating. So then it may well be, if they've like a half a kilo, their warm-up's going to get them covered. They're totally fine, Now, I don't like people relying on their warm-up to make weight, but what I'm just saying is, by doing the water load, you're going to get the flush out benefits, but if it comes that you need to sweat, you're going to be in a much better place.
You're going to be in a much better place to do so. So for me, for example, that might be as much as 3 kilos for a 90 kilo, maybe even as
and that's
higher.
Without adjusting calories. That's just drinking some more water and changing up your carb sources for 3 days beforehand.
So that would have been a whole better idea. To do. I did elements of that, to be fair. I'm not giving myself too hard a time, but again, it was an extreme sort of circumstance that we spoke about at the start there.
A surprise heavyweight is the worst type.
But the that's incredibly interesting. So that's like, we could probably just like tell people, just listen to that last 4 minutes.
Just log in, skip forward.
Hear the first bit where I'm an idiot, and then hear the last bit where what I should have done. No, that's great. That's great. That's really super. Listen, so how people can contact you?
Instagram, so it's Female Fight Nutritionist. Or my website is femalefightnutritionist.com.
Listen, I think you do a lot of work. We didn't get into it because our male listeners would turn off immediately, but you do a lot of work with the female athletes, particularly in terms of the menstrual cycle and stuff like that. Which is something I again, it's like alien to me. And when I started to like kind of listen to the girls here talking about it, I was like, holy crap.
It's another element to add into making weight,
a lot of and there's and it's not just chance. You're not leaving it to chance. You're following the science, and you're following the And so if anybody's listening, and even if it's their daughter or whatever, the most powerful tool in relation to that is tracking your own cycle and knowing what your body does, because it's all so unique. So if someone comes to me and they know, like, competitions fight on this day of my cycle, and normally I jump up a kilo in water around then we can work with that. We can add in some supplements to help them flush out that extra bloat, or we can manage it. Worst case is if someone says, I don't know what happens, I just feel miserable, and then I get my period, and so track it. The power is in your hands and your body. There's big movements online now about cycle syncing and training around your cycle, and they'd lead you to believe you should go to a hut for a week once a month. But like, if you've ever met an athlete, they're going to take off a quarter of their year just to go to a hut and chill and do yoga. So I find that a bit stupid as well. What I say to people is, decide how you're feeling on the day. Don't preemptively think, I'm going to feel shit today because I'm on day 1 of my period. How about you just wake up, see how you feel, and then get on with your day. Well, listen, it's all very interesting stuff, I think, for another time, because I think it's like again, it's totally for men. It's like washes over us like really easily.
Yeah.
But I know from dealing with like female athletes that it's a huge part of it, and it's a huge concern and stressor.
Yeah, and I think for the men, men will play an important role in normalising it. You know, if you're teaching a teenage class, there's girls in there that suddenly are very uncomfortable in their body. They don't know what's going to happen. Things are sore, things are bigger than they usually were, and for it just to be very normal that they go into the toilet and there's period products or there's posters about their period around. And if the men are, like my brother-in-law is a soccer coach, and they now have in the bag, they have like a little packets of unopened knickers with pads in them and stuff, so that if anything happens to any of the girls, they just go to the first aid kit and they know it's there. They need to change their pants.
That's
they
really
go
good.
And do it.
Yeah, because I think like we there's been big movements online regarding keeping girls in sport over the long period and the long term, and it's obviously something that obviously plays a major part in it as well. So look, that's all great, and like well look, it's been fantastic. I actually, we've done so long. I thought we were going to do like much less than that, but it's been really detailed. There's lots of stuff in there that I think is really useful for people. So, Lindsey, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.